Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness But Ours.
And
Rather special and sad edition.
yeah, we are recording now on Saturday, the 18th of January 2024, 2 days after the sad news broke that David Lynch, the visionary director of Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, The Elephant Man, Inland Empire, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, Firework Walk with Me, the creator of Twin Peaks, and the man responsible for the absolute bonkers fest that is the 1984 film adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, complete with the weirding boxes and the flying blister-covered Donald Trump allegory, and
Lost Highway.
Lost. How the hell did I forget Lost
No,
Highway?
no problem. I mean, he was a true multi hyphenate because he was also a fine artist,
Yeah,
a painter, sculptor, used mixed media, and he was a musician as well.
yeah,
Usually in collaboration with people like Angelo Baldamante, but also, contributed a sort of weird rapping, half singing vocals of his own. Um, so much to love about David Lynch. Oh yeah,
yeah,
he drew a cartoon for for a long time called The Angriest Dog in the World.
yeah. David Lynch passed away at the age of 78 from was it emphysema?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
he'd been ill. He was a lifelong smoker, and that
Hmm.
and it was I think announced last year that he basically couldn't leave the house anymore. Um, I mean, constraint never stopped Lynch from making interesting, fascinating films. I mean, the I think Dune was the biggest budget he was ever given. Most of the
That's
time,
right.
he was working with quite a. He was usually working with quite meager resources, but would always produce something that was very different. Also produce something extraordinary with that. But there's only so much you can do when you can't leave the house. It's This is the second time we've done or decided to try to do a sort of in memoriam piece
Mhm.
on some. The other one being, of course, Donald Sutherland last
That's
year.
right.
Once again, this is. I mean, this is going to happen more and more often because we are both at that age now, when a lot of the creatives who played formative roles, in sort of in what we were watching, what we were reading when we were growing up, are all getting into sort of the late 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And so, we are going to be saying goodbye to a lot of those people over the next decade or two. Um, and then it'll be the turn of anyone who actually knows who we are to be sort of like when we fall off the perch. But it's as with Sutherland, it's very very hard to process the idea of a world that doesn't have David Lynch in it anymore. Um, there were very few, if any, directors, certainly in the US, who made anything even vaguely like his. He's one of those directors. I think it's very hard. You could try to imitate him, and you might imitate this stylistic thing or that stylistic thing, but the process, whatever strange internal process, which was uniquely Lynch's, that gave rise to all those imageries and narratives and elements that were entirely his. Much like Robert Aikman, I think it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I mean, one of the reasons I think why Aikman isn't as or isn't as widely acknowledged an influence as say M.R. James. You can see what James is doing in a lot of his stories. You can see the techniques and the approaches you use, and you can take those and you can adapt them to different settings, different whatever. Aikman stuff is coming out of some weird thing that's going
Whole.
on
Yeah. Um,
in his mind, and
yeah.
you can maybe imitate this or that bit of weirdness,
I mean,
but
he talked a lot, I believe, about how he didn't write scary stories so much as strange stories,
yeah,
and that he felt that his stories were a bit like dreaming. except dreaming with your hand on a pen and the pen on the paper. And I have to say that Lynch strikes me in the same way. When I think about Lynch, when I think about Aikman, I think of Aikman as like the British version of Ligotti, a person who lives completely inside their own world, and they have a particular way of looking at things that is incredibly difficult. You can resonate with it, but you can't really imitate it. And it's a resonance of process more than an imitation of effect. And similarly, Scorsese came out with a really nice piece about Lynch's death, and very nice eulogy for Lynch. But I think that he was not the same kind of director that Scorsese is. Scorsese, I think, is closest these days to Steven Soderbergh, just a person who works all the time. They're going to do whatever the fuck they want, and it's all going to be amazing, but it will all be quite different. But I think he's probably closest in terms of people who are still alive to someone like David Cronenberg, who again seems to live in a very different world than everyone else. He has very particular interests, and he does not broaden them very much. And every time he does, it doesn't work out all that well.
And so I knew it's a bit like that Jean Cocteau quote, whenever people criticize about you, cultivate that and, fucking increase the fucking thing. That's not weird.
Exactly.
That wasn't his phrase, but, because that's you. I remember Joel Lane telling me that, there was a writer's workshop he briefly attended when he was younger, and it was like, well, when are you going to move past all these, let's just move past some of these stories about, messed up families and stuff. But it's like, bitch, do you know who I am? This is what I do.
Well, I guess never. I guess I'm never gonna move past that stuff. I guess I'm never gonna, absolutely. It's like, when are you gonna get a little less florid, Gemma? When are you gonna stop with the purple prose? And
when are you gonna stop fucking going on about guns, Simon? It's like, yes, I am guilty.
When are you gonna stop going on about fucking, Gemma?
When does hell freeze over again?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, interesting what you said about now how Lynch, Aikman, Cronenberg all kind of like live in their own sort of world. I mean that's true of every writer, because every person, we live in obviously, because the only way we can perceive the world is mediated through our own senses, which and our own, and what we see and what we hear is all coloured by our own preconceptions and by our own experiences. We put different inflections and different emphases on what we
socially
see.
People are always told to purify themselves, to make themselves more accessible, make them more normal. Yes, it's like, if you keep going in that direction, you're going to lose Peoria. Lynch is one of those guys who just came out the gate not caring about losing Peoria at all. From a very early age, he had a very specific way of looking at the world, and he was fascinated by his own specificity. And in a lot of ways, I'm sorry to keep doing this, but his I don't know if he was neurodivergent, but it's a very neurodivergent way of looking at the world. It's that I cannot be other than I am.
Yes.
Here I stand. I can be no other.
Kind of.
Yes.
I mean, for me, it's been a kind of certainly in a lot of recent years. One thing is very, very much, you know what, Bestwick, you're not normal. You're not an ordinary. You. I mean, you could say that every human being, but if you're going to be a writer, you very much have to sort of like let your freak flag fly. Let your freak flag fly. Oh my God, sounds a bit reductive, but a lot of it is
a bit reductive, but at the same time, I mean, I think it appeals to a lot more people than most people believe. I think that most people acknowledge on some level that they're not quote quote normal, because normal is a setting on a washing machine, as Harley Quinn would say.
I love that.
It doesn't exist. It
Yeah,
doesn't
and
exist.
when you're younger as well. When you're younger, you want to be you often, I mean, a lot of the time you care more
Yeah,
about how people see you. You want to be
that's right.
seen as cool, as clever, as attractive, as all of those things. One of the things, one of the advantages as you get older is you give less of a shit whether people like that
Yeah.
or not. And
It's like either you're gonna like me or you're not. I'm not cool. I guess I'm clever, but I'm clever about really stupid, weird things.
yeah,
You know?
and some people will, and I think as well, if you're neurodivergent, as we know you are, and as I'm increasingly suspecting I may be,
Yeah.
then there are gonna be things about you which I mean, I don't know about you. You may have been constantly, people may have told you off about or said stop
Yep.
doing that and blah blah.
Oh yeah.
You make it feel that there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, no, this is how I am. This is just
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and
Stop trying to make me feel stupid. Stop lecturing to me. Stop.
yeah,
It's like, no, it's just I know like 5 things about this particular thing, and they're all fascinating, and I
and I
like
need to
you, and I
share them
want to
with
tell
you,
you
whether
about them.
it's or not.
And yeah, and that's who Lynch was. One of the best. There's a wonderful series called Whoever on Whoever,
Yeah.
done through Faber Books, and I've
Oh
got Lynch.
yes,
I've
yes.
got both Lynch on Lynch, the revised edition, edited by Chris Rodley, and I've also got their Cronenberg on Cronenberg.
Oh,
Um,
I can imagine that being interesting.
yeah, and both of them are fascinating. But Lynch in particular, I keep going back to again and again. And it's a series of interviews done over the years, going through his filmography, going through his development as an artist, as an artist and a director. And okay, so here's this thing from Shadow of a Twisted Hand Across My House. All of them are named after pieces of art that he did. This is a piece of art he did called "Suddenly My House Became a Tree of Sores," which I ended up using as the title of a story. Uh,
And why would you not?
exactly. So Rodley says, you seem to like going in close on situations, not content with appearances, like the opening sequence of Blue Velvet, from the idyllic carapace of a neighborhood to the teeming insects under the front lawn of a house. And he says, a National Geographic photo of garden is just the most beautiful thing, or a pine tree against a blue sky with a couple of puffy white clouds does something to you. But if you take one step closer, you see that each tree has got a lot to overcome to get to that size. As a gardener, you have to stay on top of an awful lot of things. My childhood was elegant homes, tree-lined streets, the milkman building backyard forts, droning airplanes, blue skies, picket fences, green grass, cherry trees. Middle America, as it's supposed to be. But on the cherry tree, there's this pitch oozing out. Some black, some yellow, and millions of red ants crawling on it, all over it. I discovered that if one looks a little closer at this beautiful world, there are always red ants underneath. Because I grew up in a perfect world, other things were a contrast. I saw life in extreme close-ups. In one, for instance, saliva mixed with blood, or long shots of a peaceful environment. I had a lot of friends, but I loved being alone and looking at insects swarming in the garden. And I read shit like that, and I'm just like, yes, you go, you. Because that is David Lynch. That is David Lynch right there. That is Twin
Yeah.
Peaks. That is, you know,
Blue Velvet. Yeah.
Blue Velvet. That is, there. Even in things where you start out in a slightly more sophisticated place, like Lost Highway, which is in a lot of ways like every film noir you've ever seen,
Yeah.
shoved together into like a mega film noir, an urban noir, or just a riff on noirs, um, or Wild at Heart. which just
Yeah.
begins with the most, ridiculously over the top and very sexual relationship between two people.
Oh, I know.
you
It's
know,
like Laura Dern's just kind of like bloody hell, love.
yeah, seriously, it's like I'm just like I'm being, puppeted around by hot, moist waves coming out of my vagina, you know.
I don't know if she
Like a
actually
weird
says that, but it
engine.
feels like she should.
Yeah, exactly. Like a weird engine. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, she's the sort of the sexuality in that is just extraordinary,
yeah,
and it's got that kind of weird. It's got a very. It's not a. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think I read the novel many moons ago now, and I remember the Diane Ladd character isn't like this evil, wicked witch monster. There is actually a reconciliation between
yeah,
her and Lula. Johnny Farragut is actually survives, and he helps find them and get them out. I
yeah.
don't think. Yeah, he definitely departs from the source material to make it very.
Oh,
It
yeah, he
becomes this
absolutely
sort of
does. And
this.
the guy who wrote Wild at Heart, the novel Wild at Heart, is the same guy who wrote Perda de Durango and is the same
Yes,
guy who he co-wrote Lost Highway with.
Harry Gifford. Yeah,
Barry Gifford, yeah.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, Wild at Heart is a very There's a great deal of the Wizard of Oz in there. I mean, quite openly. With with Diane Ladd very much cast as the Wicked Witch of the West, I think. Um,
yeah, she is. And there's this real sense that, there's the freedom of the road and this image of, like two teen lovers, getting together and just bursting out into the world like an
two,
outlaw
two of the
fantasy.
oldest teams you've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's like it's an outlaw fantasy, which is very, very American. But
Yes.
very quickly you see again the bugs. The bugs are under everything. And, the bugs are the other side of human nature, which is the worst. One of the things that I wrote immediately after Lynch died, the same day I got on Blue Sky, and I thought, okay, well, I've got to say something. And the first thing I said was, under the dirt, the bugs, above the dirt, the roses, R.I.P. David Lynch.
That's a very good kind of description of it. Because I mean, I suppose the initial reading you'd make of something like Blue Velvet is you see this world where there is, which is all nice and happiness, and then you think you see the bugs underneath, and you think so that world is false. The
And
reality is
but the reality is that the ear feeds the bugs, and the bugs have to be there to feed the roses.
yeah.
It's like it's a world where mulch has to be made, and everything is. I think he said at one point that you have to understand that the world is cyclical, and it's full of a wild pain and expansiveness, and that everything is, we should all be super happy. I don't understand why we're not, but darkness keeps creeping in.
I mean, the cyclical thing's interesting because we're thinking of how Wild at Heart ends more or less with the same image as it opens with. You see the restoration of that kind of picture postcard 1950s America. It's like, but it's like these things do exist. We do have these places where there is happiness and stability and loving families and loving relationships.
Yes,
but they are not easy. They
no.
are only there are the bugs, there's the darkness, there's the Frank Booths of this world.
I always, or the fact that you're living with your killer, you're living with your father who is going to rape and kill you. It's like, and you can be Leland Palmer and Bob at the same time, and I always remember the first time that I saw the pilot episode of Twin Peaks, and there's that sequence where Laura Palmer's death is announced at school, and people just start to cry. Everyone starts to cry. It's like this outpouring, this gigantic wave of emotion that goes through school and goes through town. And and you're like, who was this girl that she meant so much to everybody? And, in Fire Walk with Me, we see that, she is like this image of perfection. And inside the image of perfection is, she's just a bunch of bugs walking around in a human suit by that point in her life. And yet there's still enough of her left that she doesn't want her best friend to become like her, that she doesn't want to, pull people down with her, that she dreams about, it's like, what is the heaven that I can possibly aspire to? It's to fall through space and eventually burst into flames and just burn away until I'm not there anymore.
I didn't really watch as much of Twin Peaks. I got bits of it. I did watch Firewalk with Me, and even though I figured there was quite a lot that was going on that I might understand better if I'd watched the series, I was blown away by just how strange and dark and nightmarish that film.
But it's such an explicit, for the time in particular, it's such an explicit portrait of what incest does to somebody, and what, trauma like that does to somebody, where you just, you really feel like you've been eaten away from the inside, and there's nothing left, like everything about you is a bad joke, and that you're lying constantly to everyone around you. And you don't understand why this happened to you, and you don't understand how it could have been allowed to happen to you. And all of these things are so huge. There's such huge emotions, huge dark emotions, that are so difficult to channel through human beings. And one of the things that I really feel about him is that he feels as though there's a numinosity in everything, which is made out of human emotion and imagination. And we can, we are capable of the best and the worst at the same time. In The Return, there's this episode, which I'm not going to go into. It involves a guy saying "got a light" a lot, but basically it implies that the Manhattan Project cracked the world open, and that what we see as almost cosmic horror, a cosmic kind of evil, seeps in through that. But the point is, and possibly we could have chosen to imagine the bomb and not make it. But no, we had to make it.
We had to make it.
And so just as God made swans and anthrax, as Dr. Lecter points out, we made the bomb. We were always going to make the bomb.
Yeah.
And so we want to believe that this evil comes from another place, like a man from another place, like the Red Lodge. We want to believe that, but it doesn't. The Red Lodge is inside of you. You are the person at the back of Winkies. Potentially, you're always the person at the back of Winkies. The person who's so horrifying that if you looked at that face, you would just die.
Well,
that's from Mulholland Drive, in case you're wondering. So you saw Fire Walk with Me, as you said.
Yeah.
So you remember the sequence where they go to that place above the store, which I guess is like a sub place of the Red Lodge, and the man from another place, and the one-armed man, and everybody else, they're all sitting around. They bring in Leland Palmer, and Leland Palmer sicks up this stuff that looks like creamed corn on the table, on the Formica table, and they call it Garmin Bosia.
Yeah.
Garmin Bosia, pain and suffering. And the idea is that that's what those people exist to produce. They exist to produce, or to force us to produce Garmin Bosia, by destroying the things that we love, by defiling them, by making them as evil as we believe ourselves to be. And then, like eating them up because we love them so, and then sicking them back out, modified to go out into the world and spread more evil, spread more, like go through some weird kind of insectoid kind of cycle,
Yeah,
like you're carrying some kind of parasite or some kind of fungus and you're spreading it around, like you're an assless cicada, with fungus spilling out of one half of your body,
Well,
and it's this insane image, but at the same time, it is very, very true to me. I look at that and I go, yes, this is secret knowledge, but it's a secret knowledge that resonates with me utterly. It's like a plucked string inside my head. And so he says, I feel that between 9 and 17 years old most of the time, and sometimes around 6, but darkness has crept in since then. The darkness is realization about the world and human nature and my own nature, all combined into one big ball of sludge. Again, yep, you got it. He was a huge fan of transcendental meditation.
yes, he was.
And when he talks about getting the idea for something, which he does a little later in this same interview, the interviewer says, "What's so satisfying to you about painting, and why do you still feel compelled to do it?" And Lynch says, "Well, you can sit in a chair, and I love just sitting in a chair and going off and float away. And sometimes when I'm going to sleep, especially, or sitting in a chair with my eyes closed, I drift through this one space where images just come, and I'm not prompting them. In fact, if I start thinking about it, they stop. And because I don't judge them and I don't think about them too much, they just come in. They're usually in a series of things, like if it's a face, the next face is just a little bit different from the first face. It's all in the same line. And some of these ideas or images are kind of thrilling. To paint something is a way of catching them in a more permanent way. Then you have a thing you can look at. 99% of these images you can't remember a week later. And a painting kind of reminds you of those. Also, it exists. And you work it up to a place where you say it's done and it's pleasing. It's a little bit of a thrill to have it, to have experienced it. I have this thing about when you listen to someone like a teacher, if you draw while you listen to the teacher, the drawing may not have anything to do with what you're hearing. But if you're tested on what he or she said, all you have to do is run your finger over the drawings and the words, what was said, are recorded in there. It's like you're a needle on a record, and it's weird. And
Love that.
yeah, I utterly love that. I cannot tell you how freeing that idea is. It's horrifying as well, the idea of like opening yourself up like a Muppet with the skull going back, or like you're cracking open your own head and just saying and invoking, and just saying, I have a space, come fill it. I have an eye, show me an image,
Yeah.
And it's very it's very religious. It's very much like I'm a seer, sitting in a dark room with a mirror on the floor, or a bowl of water,
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to look into this and I'm going to see something. And then you just look until you see it. And,
Yeah.
I can't do that all the time, but I always think that the stuff that's really important in your work is the stuff that comes to you sidelong like that. It comes to you in a hypnagogic state. It comes to you in the moment before you actually fall asleep, and it jolts you up like you just stepped stepped in a drain, and suddenly you're like, oh wait, I got to write that down.
The trickiest part can be getting yourself into the place where you don't actually have to do anything, where all the materials.
So I mean, definitely with the meditation angle, I see Lynch as a person who really embraced the idea that everything was practice and not perfection. You know, all practice all the time, nothing ever perfect.
Yeah,
but
it's not going.
You can get it to a point where you're good with it, where you're like, well, I guess that's it, and then you let it go. And the other thing that I love about Lynch, and I've always loved about Lynch, is okay. So there's this sense of artificiality about his stuff, which is true, because everything is designed and everything is, he's very specific about what he wants, even if he's not specific about why he wants it. It just has to be like this. So there's almost this fetishistic thing to it, but fetish like a dark idol, where you take something that is mundane or odd, or, it's like, what the fuck is that? And you imbue it with this great power, a power that almost seems religious in nature, a power that comes, that seems to come from witchcraft or from another universe or whatever, where it's like, like a little saliva bubble on the asphalt that can be really beautiful, or there's another wonderful story that he tells about a dream that a friend of his used to have, who is Jack Finch, the guy from Eraserhead, and
Jack Nance.
Yeah, Jack Nance. Yeah, the guy from Eraserhead, and how he used to have this dream about a tire, just this bald tire, this rubber tire that was rolling around, and it would almost fall over, and then it would get back up and keep rolling, and it was horrifying to him for some reason, and he could never explain to him why it was so horrifying. And and Lynch was just like, no, you can't explain to anybody why that's so horrifying, but you can see it, right? You can see it in your head, and you can hear the noise, the Lynchian noise, which would be like room tone turned up really high, some weird fan, so some strange kind of drone, from a factory,
Something that is like, what he would have done. Yeah. What was your entry point into Lynch's work? What was the first thing of his you saw?
The first thing I ever saw, I think, was actually Eraserhead, because I think I've said before that I had all the cult movie books by Danny Peary, and one of them, I think the first one, the first entry in the E section is Eraserhead, and and the plot of Eraserhead is just a dream of dark and troubling things.
It's about right.
But it's not right. And I remember I went to see it with a friend, a guy who I think wanted to date me, and that didn't work out. And we went to a review cinema. It was like 10 o'clock at night, might have been midnight, and we watched Eraserhead, and it just mounted on me, and that baby was so horrifying to me that near the end I just shut my eyes and I couldn't watch the screen, and I kept asking the guy to explain to me what was happening, because it sounded just as bad. In fact, I shouldn't have shut my eyes, because I was thinking of stuff that was probably much worse than what was actually happening.
That film was probably a more effective contraceptive than you'd think. It would put a lot of people off ever wanting to have kids.
Yeah, it totally is. I mean, just that entire thing of like, so you go over to your sort of girlfriend's house, and her mom is like, so she had a baby, and it's we assume it's yours, so you're gonna have to take it. And don't ever come back here again.
Oh man.
And you're left with this horrible thing that looks like a fetus in a
A chicken or something.
yeah, like a chicken fetus, like a, I don't even know. So many people have asked him how he made that baby, and he was just like, yeah, no, I can't tell you that. I take it jelly had a lot to do with maybe. but, but yeah, so that was the first thing that I saw. And then I didn't see anything of his until Blue Velvet.
First one for me was The Elephant Man, which is a comparatively mild way to ease yourself in. Although
true.
it's still, it's one extraordinary film. In some ways, it's one of his more, one of his most almost
normal.
Yeah, it's as close as he got to making a convention, any kind of convention. Although even then, he's making it in black and white, and there were still these strange abstract sequences. But first and foremost, I mean, it is.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm lying anyways, because I did see The Elephant Man and I did see Dune. So, but I was thinking of The Elephant Man as being like going to see the play The Elephant Man, and I was thinking of Dune as being like I'm going to see Dune. I wasn't thinking of them as David Lynch movies per se.
Although they quite, I mean, the Denis Villeneuve film is probably a better adaptation of the book overall, but I mean, the Denis Villeneuve movie does not have Patrick Stewart charging into a fight with a battle pug in his arms.
That is true.
Which is just, true. I have no idea where the pug came from, but it's just, why not? What you Cleto and House Atreides.
the most Lynchian section of Villeneuve's Dune is probably in Dune Part 2, when we go to the Harkonnen world, to Giedi Prime.
To say that bit.
Yeah. No, check it out. It's very Lynchian.
I mean, I say we watched the first part of Villeneuve's Dune, and again, Kate had not been keen at all. She's not keen on science. She's not keen on science fiction stuff in space. She can't stand Star Wars. She did love Battlestar Galactica, but that was the exception rather than the rule. But she loved it, and I think because it's more like, it's closer to Game of Thrones in its feel than it is sort of Star Wars. It's Game of Thrones in space effectively.
Mm-hmm.
It's, instead of different parts of this one fantasy world, it's different planets.
Yes.
That you have from Caladan to Arrakis to
exactly.
Prime and all the rest of it. And it's just extraordinary. But I mean, there is a lot to love about the Lynch one. I think it's a very hard book for anyone.
Yeah. It's an incredibly hard book to do. But yeah, the thing that Lynch brought to the table more than anything else is this weird sort of palpability. And now we're just going to go into the drain for no reason, and see. I'm going to show you what it's like to be inside of this this harvester.
You've got the music's terrific as well. It's Prophecy theme, the Take My Hand by Toto. I mean, Toto, for God's sake. The guys the first thing you think of with Toto was usually Africa, and then they do this extraordinary. And that final, the end titles music as well, which is just gorgeous, complete with that quite old style thing where you just see every each character, the photo of them coming up. It's just glorious.
I saw that woman for like a second.
Yes.
She was there and then she died. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Alicia Witt going, "He is the Quetzalcoatl."
Yes. Yeah. It's. I mean, again, as one friend of mine did point out, the whole point with one of the things that definitely got missed in the Lynch adaptation. Certainly, the second half is where it starts to maybe come a bit too far away from the book. Is that it's kind of all downhill for House Atreides after that point. It's like this guy isn't Luke Skywalker. This guy is the Ayatollah. He is.
And definitely Villeneuve is more aware of that from the very beginning. At any rate, and then when I think I was actually almost already a critic when Blue Velvet came out. I was like very close to being either in university or or already a critic when Blue Velvet came out. And one of the things that I always found interesting, Blue Velvet is it's a slap in the face. It's a stomach punch. And I cannot say that I loved it the first time I saw it, although there were parts of it that made me, gave me urges in my areas, and there were parts in it that made me very uncomfortable in a really fascinating way. But and parts that just made me go, what? What the fuck?
I mean, I've seen it, but it's been so long, and I really want to watch it again, and really, I mean, there's just so many, because the casting of Isabella Rossellini in a film like that, one which is clearly very influenced by film noir, and maybe a little bit by 50s melodrama as well.
I would say absolutely by 50s melodrama. The upper part of it is totally 50s melodrama. It is Douglas Sirk to the max.
Yeah, but because of course Rossellini looks so like her mother. So I don't think Ingrid Bergman was ever in any actual film noir, but she looks. Yeah. But she's from that era. So it's a kind of a happy accident in some ways. It creates that kind of connection. He
said himself that he's obsessed with textures. Actually, when he was younger, he used Nair to take all the hair off of a mouse to see what it would look like. And he said, yeah, I know. And he said, and it looked beautiful. And, so from the very beginning with that, the blue velvet curtains, and you're so close to them, and they are so vivid. And
you really want to reach out and touch them. And
absolutely. But then that really springs back on you when you're dealing with something like, and now here's Isabella Rossellini covered in bruises, walking naked down the street, and it's like the two parts of your life, it's like you can squat inside a closet and, play weird, sexy, dirty games with an older lady, but eventually she may come walking down the street into your barbecue, and everyone's going to see the dirty things that you've been doing,
because with Laura Dern, she's like this lovely, sweet, and you want to take her out and have a milkshake with her and go to the movies and kiss her. It's very hard to put that together with the more kinky and naughty things you would like to do. You can do all those with Isabella Rossellini, but like you say, she comes staggering in all battered to fucking bleeding, and then starts saying, Jeffrey, which
Baby wants to fuck,
Frank,
here's your fuck, Frank. I mean, and just the insanity of, it's like, okay, your perfect town probably has some crime in it, but what the fuck is that? Do those people even make money? Do they? It's not crime. It's just like being evil for no reason.
It's just all means to an end. It's just it's kind of like he probably makes money from it, but you definitely get the feeling that the
he'd be doing it anyway.
I've heard a lot of discussion of Blue Velvet in psychoanalytic, Freudian terms.
Exactly.
And in which case Frank Booth is pretty much the id incarnate.
Absolutely.
He has all those urges in your areas, including the ones that you're not supposed to.
Our main character is, very heady. Literally, he's the detective. But the minute that he looks through that keyhole, what he's looking at will come and grab him by the penis and pull him out.
Quite
quite literally. And
I mean, Carl McLachlan is perfect. I mean, I kind of did you do Dune before Blue Velvet or after?
I think he was actually. I think actually the first thing he was ever in was Dune, so that was where I knew him from.
He does have that kind of quite fresh-faced, innocent look about him.
Yes, but even now, which is strange. He just seems to live in a completely different world, much like David Lynch, and it makes total sense that Lynch kind of grabbed him and made him be his avatar. So there's all of this stuff. And I remember, as a critic, one of the people that I absolutely had huge respect for and actually modeled myself after in a lot of ways was Roger Ebert. Ebert hated hated Lynch.
Really?
Yeah, he absolutely. It's like he knew that Lynch was a good director. He knew that Lynch was working with a paint box that nobody else had. But he was just like, I just don't understand why you would do that with it, And there was this real feeling like that was all he could see. He could only see the bugs. He couldn't see the roses.
Yeah.
He could only see.
It's something like, I think Stephen King has said this. Whatever you do, whatever kind of creative field you're in, someone will always accuse you of wasting your God-given talent. Why are you having to do this? Why are you doing that? Because
why are you writing these EC comics?
Why do you do this bit? Because that's who I am. This is bitch, it's my ass. As your
absolutely. And the thing that Lynch commits to, which is very difficult to take if you're analytical in any way, shape, or form, is that he commits to the inexplicable.
Yeah.
He commits to the unrestrained. He's just like, can you explain this? No. I'm not going to explain that.
Yeah,
like, I don't think there's any point in trying to explain that. I don't understand it myself.
I saw in one interview that he said, I think Eraserhead is my most spiritual film, and the interview said, elaborate on that, and he said no.
And he's not being a dick. It's just like, if I poke at it too much, it's going to collapse. It's like a flan,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I can ever quite do it to the extent that, again, I think I sort of said before, a lot of it is there's almost a kind of unlearning process involved in becoming, in getting your own voice as a writer, in actually just, fuck what you're supposed to do or what people think you should say or what blah, blah. Yeah. It's like the Italo Calvino quote of, instead of writing, and he would talk about our ancestors, this triptych out of novellas, Our Ancestors, he said, instead of writing the book that I ought to write, I wrote the book that I would like to read. Like finding an attic with the cover missing and the author's name missing, and just read. And so there is that kind of thing of unlearning and of just committing to this whatever, just fully.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that things that creativity begins in pastiche, and I think that is true. But it begins in pastiche because when we first encounter things, we think that what we're attracted to is the language, and what we're actually attracted to is the ideas.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to dissever the two, to untangle the language from the ideas, and to develop your own kind of language.
And yes, and there's nothing wrong with learning by. I mean, Ramsey Campbell's often talks about that thing of a lot of, if you look at music, a lot of early works by composers will sound very like the mature works of composers who came before, but you'd never mistake the mature work of Beethoven or Haydn or whoever for anybody else's.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And
the structure of a lot of, I mean, for me, when I started, a lot of it was seeing how a story, seeing how the basic structure of a story works. There's a setup, and then there's this, and there's that, and with that you can actually start telling the stories, and you can get from A to B, and you can see, and that enables you to sort of tap that vein, and that kind of stuff about character and imaging. You start to find out maybe what it is you want to say, if you've got something to say, all those things, the stuff you didn't expect to touch upon just goes poof, and those are the moments that make it all worthwhile.
So A Dream of Dark and Troubling Things is what you start with, or you start with it's about a woman in trouble, which is essentially the plot or the summation of Inland Empire. Peter Straub comes closest to Lynch on the page for me. There's a lot of not actual crossover, but a lot of resonance between, say, a really late work of his like A Dark Matter and Twin Peaks: The Return. It's sort of like he's gathering all the stuff that he's been interested in and sticking it in one place and trying to unpack it as much as humanly possible. And again, it's about how things that we do in this world resonate with another world and then maybe rebound upon us, and yeah, so or that phrase, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Well, I won't tell you that,
That
but
was the worst thing that ever happened to
I
me.
will tell you the worst thing that ever happened to me, and but the two things that you have to understand is that it's not just the worst, it's the best as well. It's because there's grace too.
Yeah.
And both of those artists are really interested in the idea of grace. What does that, what prevents you from going forward, and how can you deal with your own pain and not spread it around?
Yeah.
How can you deal with your own trauma and not do it by deforming everything that's around you? And and it's fascinating to watch him, like and to watch both Straub and Lynch over the course of their careers realize that that's what they were actually always trying to talk about. Always trying to talk about, it's like terrible things happen for no reason except that people want to do them.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really took away from Lynch, and there with a lot of the great artists, is, and it kind of goes back to the other stuff I was saying about just, casting aside all the preconceptions and all what you're supposed to, and just committing entirely to hear these weird ideas. I'm just going to follow them wherever I go. And so the finished thing, it's like, well, I'm not here to, it shouldn't be about having to explain this or explain that. It is what it is. This thing is the work, the story, the piece of art. It exists in and of itself.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stuff for me. But do I even? I probably don't even. There's a lot of stuff there that maybe even I don't understand, that other people will look at and they'll see stuff going on, and everyone will. And again, is that a thing of everyone? Everything is mediated through your own preconceptions, through your own experiences, and so on and so forth. It is what it is, and it doesn't need justifying, and it doesn't need, and it doesn't.
You can unpack it and unpack it and unpack it, but it doesn't need justification. Yeah, absolutely. And even if you just keep peeling layers of it away, there will be more layers underneath that, because there need to be. There's nothing inside of everything, and there's everything inside of nothing. And so there are two things that I also would like to say that resonate very hugely with me. And the first one is, and both of them are lines from Twin Peaks. And the first one is when Garland Ross is asked, Garland, what are you afraid of? What's the thing you're afraid of most in the world? And he says, the possibility that love may not be enough. Yeah. And the other one is when Gordon, played by David Lynch, is talking to Denise, played by David Duchovny, and he says, and when you became Denise, I told your colleagues, those clown comedians, that they would have to fix their hearts or die.
Oh, yeah. That's lovely.
Yeah. And, it's like, what is more wholesome than that, for Christ's sakes?
Yeah.
It's like, so yes, on the one hand, everything, all the ugliness. And on the other hand, these moments of intense, numinous beauty.
Yeah.
Where the world opens up and you're like, oh, and that was there all the time. There all the time.
I've seen Eraserhead once years and years ago, and I think I really need to see it again. One friend of mine did claim that you should really watch it stoned, but I'm not quite sure how I do with if I tried that. But maybe watch it not stoned first.
Yes.
But
I mean, that whole thing of, it's like, on the one hand, there's a guy in a room somewhere on the moon or something, who's opening a chute, and mutated sperm is falling to Earth and, causing people like Mary to give birth to horribly mutated babies. But on the other hand, there's also the woman inside the radiator who also seems to be mutated in some way. She's got this big lumpy face, and she's kind of dressed like Marilyn Monroe, and she's singing that song, in heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, so much of Lynch is linked to music for me as well.
Yes.
And because music is emotion. It is a point of emotion, and it perfectly mimics that Peter Weir-like thing where you're watching Picnic at Hanging Rock, and you almost think that you're almost about to understand something,
and you don't,
and then you don't, and it's
well,
fine.
It was Oscar Wilde, wasn't it? Said that from in point of form, all art inspires to the condition of music. And I think Lynch himself compared his films to freeform jazz, didn't he?
Yes. And so, when he took Angelo Badalamenti aside in the beginning and said, for Laura Palmer's theme, I want just the saddest song in the world, just a song like your heart is breaking, like a sob, not like a scream, like a sob. And it's true, and this, in the same way I used to listen to Julie Cruz's music that she had composed, that he produced.
Yeah.
And some of it was used in Twin Peaks and some of it wasn't. Some of it was used in other stuff of his and some of it wasn't. But her music is, what was it? She used to call it dark industrial or something like that. And that is Lynch to me. That is the keynote is, Julie Cruz's voice, high and beautiful, singing Into the Night or The World Turns, and
I feel like we've said all we can possibly find to say, and half like it feels like there should be much more we can say, but we probably still couldn't.
All we can say is that this man existed, and he still exists. In the same way that when Angelo Badalamenti died, he spoke about him, and the person who was interviewing him said, "I can't help but notice that you still talk about him in the present tense." And he said, "Yeah, well, I just don't believe that we'll never see each other again. I can't. I don't believe that people die. We go somewhere, we become something. But I just don't believe, I can't see it any other way. It doesn't make any sense." And I think that's what I believe about David Lynch as well. It's what I believe about most things, but definitely about David Lynch. David Lynch will always be part of my life.
I suppose it's hard to believe that anyone watching this has not seen something by David Lynch, but on the off chance there is anyone watching this this YouTube channel and maybe thinking, I don't know who the hell, I've never seen this guy before, but it feels like I should really watch something. What would you say? Apart from that, but what would you suggest they start with?
Oh man, that's really difficult.
Tell me about it.
Okay. I wouldn't start with Eraserhead.
Fuck no.
Okay, so for myself, I would either start with Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway, and I would be possibly more likely to start with Mulholland Drive because the story of Mulholland Drive is a really interesting one because it was supposed to be the first half of Mulholland Drive is essentially the pilot episode of another show.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Mulholland Drive was supposed to be a show-long narrative.
Wow.
And it just did not work out. And, someone literally came and took Lynch aside and was like, David, we can't give you the money for this show, but we can give you money for the back half of a film. So in a lot of ways, the amazing thing about Mulholland Drive is that, you know, both of them are noirs, and noir is a genre that I think people find really easy to get into.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and both of them have elements of that fear that comes from nowhere, the fear that comes from nothing. You know, both of them have a kind of thriller atmosphere, and really great characters that will kind of, you know, lap you in. But in both cases, something happens in the middle of each film, which causes the film to loop around and deconstruct itself.
That's certainly true of Lost. I have a terrible confession to make. I haven't yet seen Mulholland Drive.
I know,
So
but you know, I know a lot of young people who came in with Mulholland Drive, and a lot of them who came out the back of Mulholland Drive, and they were just like, "What the fuck? Who is this guy?" You know.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to begin with for me. And you know, I'm just a huge fan of Lost Highway. So that's why I recommend that as well.
The two I would probably have been torn between is Lost Highway and Blue Velvet, I think.
Yeah, and Blue Velvet is, I mean, it's hard though. I mean, given how many people out there, how many young people out there find sex cringe.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's like,
Think, oh God,
Blue Velvet is pretty. It's like
Lynch
that.
has been criticized. I mean, it is. I've seen people criticize Lynch as a misogynist because of all the women who get killed and brutalized in his stuff, which I think is a very. I think that's a very reductive way of looking at it. I mean, the thing is, if you're determined to reduce everything to tropes of one kind or another, then you're going to do that.
Well, the world is full of tropes. And you know,
and unfortunately, the world's full of a lot of narratives in which women are brutalized and killed. Unfortunately, so's real life. I can,
sadly, yes.
I can understand certainly if, you know, sort of, oh no, another fucking film about a woman who's been murdered. I'm not interested. I get that. I do get that.
There's an element in Lost Highway which does indeed begin with, you know, a woman being murdered, but there's an element in Lost Highway of, I would say, almost deconstructionism on an artistic scale.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, you will be destroyed and recombined. You'll be destroyed and come back. You will become a different person, but you'll be the same person. And it also has that wonderful moment, which I won't really describe, where this woman that he's been pursuing through all these lives essentially turns to him and says, "You'll never have me."
Yes.
You know, it's like, it doesn't matter whether, you know, whether my flesh is torn apart, or whether I become a different person, or whether I have blonde hair or brown hair, you know. It's like, I am something else. I'm not you. I'm not just a part of you.
Yeah.
I'm not just something that you can catch and put in a cage.
Yes, very much so.
So, yeah, I think, and just deal with the fact that they're all dreams.
Yes.
That all of these movies are dreams. All movies are dreams, but all of these movies are super ass dreams.
Yeah.
They are not going to make the kind of sense you want them to make.
No, but
they may make a kind of sense that you will find yourself going, I almost get what he was.
Yeah. They will always be worth watching. They will always, and they are like nothing else out there.
Palimpsests. They're like Rorschach blots. They're like, and they will make you want to create as well.
So yeah. So David Lynch, who died on the 16th of January 2024, thus helping ensure that this year got off to a fucking shit start. I mean, we all have to go sometime, and he hadn't been in great health, but the world is poorer for his leaving it, but he has left behind an extraordinary body of work that is like no one else's.
Richer for his existence and his
Yes.
and his example. The example of, I'm just going to be as weird as I need to be. And, maybe I'll just be making stuff out of garbage in a shed, or maybe I'll be an award-winning filmmaker and the French will keep giving me money. Much like David Cronenberg.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, so we hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to support the podcast and help us to make more stuff like this, then you can subscribe to our Patreon, or you can make a one-off donation through our Ko-Fi page. The links will be in the description below.
Yeah.
We will be back soon, much sooner than you probably want, to lower the tone of the conversation once again. But until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
I remain Gemma Files, and this is still No Darkness,
Darkness
but ours.
but ours.